Old Testament History, Chapter 2, Session 6b, the Flood. We are now at the Genesis flood. This is another difficult subject because of all the unbelief in the world. We Bible-believing folks are assailed almost daily with so-called scientific facts which challenge our faith. I really agree with Arnold last week, who taught about science in the Bible. And he said that if we could harmonize real science with the Bible, it would be the Holy Grail. Throughout the centuries, scholars have tried to do that regarding the flood. And many books have been published with many fascinating theories, pointing out many geological anomalies which don't fit the conventional theories. The fundamental question is, where'd the water come from? Well, the obvious answer is from space. Now, one might think that the more we learn about science, the more remote the possibility that the flood happened. But I think the opposite. The more accurate the facts are, the more legitimate the flood will be. All the ancient cultures of the world have remembrance of a great flood. Might that be the same as the zodiac, with a common biblical ancestor? As I've said before, many of us have seen so many miracles and so many obvious spiritual events. We know there is a God. We know there's the spiritual realm. Well, I believe there also was a flood. Even so, living in this unbelieving world can be disconcerting. Conventional science believes in uniformitarianism. That's a mouthful, but it's that things on Earth have been relatively static for a couple billion years. Well, that's ridiculous. We live in a cosmic shooting gallery called the universe. With the Hubble telescope, we've seen the remnants of supernova all over the cosmos. The dinosaurs went extinct because of a literal earth-shattering event. A 6-mile wide asteroid hit modern-day east side of Mexico. Earlier than that, a round shape of Hudson Bay was formed by a meteor impact. The earth bears scars all over itself. One thing we know for sure is that sin is not good. It acts against God and against human society. It damages people's lives and relationships and families. Sin promises gratification, but rarely delivers, and even if it is enjoyed, it usually is with us looking over our shoulder. So it's logically unacceptable. It is lying or stealing or killing promoted in any society on earth? Is covetousness admirable? Of course not. Yet man still somehow drifts deeper and deeper into it. The only logical explanation is that there has to be a devil who's constantly enticing, deceiving, eroding, and decaying. Turn to Leviticus 18, please. We'll read a little bit of this. Leviticus 18. We'll start with verse 1. And the Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say to them, I am the Lord your God. After the doings of the land of Egypt, wherein you dwelt, you shall not do. And after the doings of the land of Canaan, whither I bring you, you shall not do, neither shall you walk in their ordinances. You shall do my judgments, and keep my ordinances, to walk therein. I am the Lord your God. You shall therefore keep my statutes, my judgments, which if a man do, he shall live in them. I am the Lord. None of you shall approach to any that is near of kin to him, to uncover their nakedness. I am the Lord. That idiom, uncover their nakedness, means to do carnal things with them. Verse 18, we'll skip down. There's a whole bunch of specifics about that, but we'll skip down to verse 20. Moreover, thou shalt not lie carnally with thy neighbor's wife to defile thyself with her. Well, what society would permit that? And thou shalt not let any of thy seed pass through the fire. That's human sacrifice to Moloch. Neither shalt thou profane the name of the Lord thy God. I am the Lord. Thou shalt not lie with mankind as with womankind. It's an abomination. Thou shalt not lie with any beast to defile thyself therewith. Neither shall any woman stand before a beast to lie down thereto. It's confusion, and it sure is. Defile not yourselves in any of these things, for in all these the nations are defiled, which I cast out before you, and the land is defiled. Therefore I do visit the iniquity thereof upon it, and the land itself vomits out her inhabitants. Well, this same thing is what was happening to the whole world in Genesis 6. Verse 26. You shall therefore keep my statutes and my judgments, and shall not commit any of these abominations, neither any of your own nation, nor any stranger that sojourns among you. For all these abominations have the men of the land done, which were before you, and the land is defiled. And the land spew not you out also, when you defile it, as it spewed out the nations that were before you. For whosoever shall commit any of these abominations, even the souls that commit them shall be cut off from among their people. Therefore shall you keep mine ordinances, that you commit not any one of these abominable customs which were committed before you, and that you defile not yourselves therein. I am the Lord your God. So, there's a principle at work here. As sin in the garden cursed the ground and defiled it, further sin defiles it further. How so? Well, if the closer to God we get, the better off we are, then the further from God we get, the closer to the devil and the worse off we should be. Why? Because all the devil wants to do is kill us and steal from us and destroy us. When God set up the foundations of the earth, the fundamental rules which govern everything, he was fair, even to the evil ones. Because us humans are so ignorant of spiritual things. Because we can't see spiritual verities. If we were angels, if we could, most of us would stay on the straight and narrow. We'd never take the wrong road if we could clearly see the consequences. Well, we're stupid. So God is fair. He makes his sun to shine and his rain to fall on the just and the unjust. He's fair. He gives us fools multiple changes to change the road we're on. But ultimately, those turnarounds cease, and we run headlong into the brick wall at the end of the wrong road. We circle the drain for a while before we finally go down. Well, one day in Genesis, the world ran out of chances except for one man, Noah. Genesis chapter 6, verse 5. Genesis chapter 6, verse 5. And God saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I've created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the creeping thing, and the fowls of the air, for it repents me that I have made him. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Now, verse 7 says God will destroy. But we know that that is the Hebrew idiom of permission, because God is light and in him is no darkness at all. Every good and every perfect gift comes from the Father of lights, in whom there is no variableness, nor even a shadow of turning. So, how does that from James square with this, I shall destroy? Well, in the front of Young's Concordance, the older editions, there are 2 valuable pages titled Hints and Helps to Bible Interpretation. It's full of great information on how to bridge the gaps between our modern society and ancient Hebrew culture. It explains many idioms that are in the Bible and sheds light on what they really mean. Number 70b in that list is this idiom, which it says, quote, active verbs frequently express a permission for it, whatever the action. And the first example that it gives is Exodus 4:21. Take a look at Exodus 4:21. It says, and the Lord said to Moses, when you go to return into Egypt, see that you do all those wonders before Pharaoh, which I have put in thine hand. But I will harden his heart, that he shall not let the people go. This is the Hebrew idiom of permission. Really, it meant, I will permit his heart to be hardened. Because how could God be sending Moses to lead his people out of Egypt, but at the same time be hardening Pharaoh's heart to not let them go? I mean, is God schizophrenic? Is he Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde? No. I mean, is our existence merely a cosmic game of chess in which we cannot fathom the rules? Of course not. Yet, confused believers think he works in mysterious ways, or they blame him for many things that his enemy does, because they don't know this idiom. The literal rendering of this is, I will permit his heart to be hardened. In other words, he passed all the turnarounds, and he's running into the brick wall. I mean, how many plagues were there? Similarly, in Genesis 6:7, God will permit the world to be destroyed. Why? Because it had run out of chances to repent. Jude 6 and 2 Peter tell us what really happened. These 2 verses are connected by an uncommon word, chains. Look at Jude, back by the book of Revelation. Verse 6, there's only one chapter. Jude, verse 6. And the angels, which kept not their first principality, arche, but left their own habitation, dwelling place, he hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness, unto the judgment of the great day. 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 4 and 5. It goes with this. 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 4 and 5. For if God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell, and that's the word Tartarus, and delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved unto judgment. Look at how those, see all the common words between those 2 verses? They're connected. And spared not the old world, but saved Noah, the 8th person, a preacher of righteousness, bringing in the flood upon the world of the ungodly. Verse 5 is related to verse 4 and Jude 6. This is what caused the flood. Some angels, some fallen angels, They didn't make the Nephilim. They did something that caused the flood. God didn't do it. They did. Whatsoever it was, it involved them violating their dwelling, the place where they belonged, and their principality, their sphere of influence. These were part of the 1/3 of angels which fell with Lucifer and were cast down to earth. They were the worst ones. That's why everything went south in the Genesis 3 through 6. Whatever they did probably involved them leaving earth, their habitation, their dwelling, because they were cast down to earth, right? Well, where did they go? Space. The ancients called that heaven. So something happened. We don't know exactly what they did, but whatever they did, it was cataclysmic. Genesis 6, verse 9. Let's start reading there. Genesis 6, verse 9. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations, and Noah walked with God. And Noah begat 3 sons, Ham, Shem, and Japheth. The earth also was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. And God said to Noah, the end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. That's that idiom of permission. Make thee an ark of gopher wood, that's oak. Rooms shalt thou make in the ark, and shalt pitch it within and without with pitch. And this is the fashion which thou shalt make it of. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, and the breadth of it 50 cubits, and the height 30 cubits. Those are perfect proportions for ships. They made models of the ark, and it is least apt to capsize of any kind of ship. They put it in those wave pools, and they hit it with everything they could. A window shalt thou make to the ark, and a cubit shalt thou finish it above, and the door of the ark shalt thou set in the side thereof, with lower, second, and third stories thou shalt make it. And behold, I, even I, do bring a flood of waters upon the earth, to destroy all flesh, wherein is the breath of life from under heaven, and everything that is in the earth shall die. Again, this involved the Hebrew idiom of permission, because now we already know who the culprits were. But, verse 18, with thee I will establish my covenant, and thou shalt come into the ark, thou and thy sons and thy wife, and thy sons' wives with thee. And also of every living thing of all flesh, 2 of every sort shalt thou bring into the ark, to keep them alive with thee. They shall be male and female. Of the fowls after their kind, cattle after their kind, of every creeping thing of the earth after his kind, 2 of every sort shall come unto thee, to keep them alive. And take thou unto thee all the food that is eaten, and thou shalt gather it to thee, and it shall be food for thee and for them. Thus did Noah, according to all that God had commanded him, so did he. Chapter 7, verse 1. And the Lord said to Noah, come thou and all thy house into the ark, for thee I have seen righteous before me in this generation. Of every clean beast thou shalt take to thee by 7s, the male and his female, and of the beasts that are not clean by 2, the male and his female. Of fowls also of the air by 7s, the male and the female, to keep seed alive upon the face of all the earth. For yet 7 days, and I will cause it to rain upon the earth, 40 days and 40 nights, and every living substance that I have made will I destroy from off the face of the earth. And Noah did according to all that the Lord commanded him. And Noah was 600 years old when the flood of waters was upon the earth. And Noah went in, and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with him, into the ark, because of the waters of the flood, of clean beasts and of beasts that are not clean, of fowls and of everything that creeps upon the earth. There went in two and two unto Noah into the ark, the male and the female, as God had commanded Noah. And it came to pass, after 7 days, the waters of the flood were upon the earth. Now, this flood account has a lot of specifics. Well, the character of this account bears the traits that only an eyewitness could relate. Genesis 7, verse 11. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, the 17th day of the month, the same day, were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened. And the rain was upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. In the selfsame day entered Noah and Shem and Ham and Japheth, and the sons of Noah and Noah's wife, and the 3 wives of his sons with them, into the ark, they and every beast after his kind, and all the cattle after their kind, and every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth after his kind, and every fowl after his kind, and every bird of every sort. And they went in unto Noah into the ark, 2 and 2 of all flesh, wherein is the breath of life. And they that went in male and female of all flesh, as God had commanded him. And the Lord shut him in. And the flood was 40 days upon the earth, and the waters increased, and bare up the ark, and it was lifted up above the earth. And the waters prevailed, and were increased greatly upon the earth, and the ark went upon the face of the waters. And the waters prevailed exceedingly upon the earth, and all the high hills that were under the whole heaven were covered. 15 cubits upward did the waters prevail, and the mountains were covered. And all flesh died that moved upon the earth, both fowl and of cattle and of beasts, and every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth, and every man. All in whose nostrils was the breath of life, and all that was in the dry land died. And every living substance was destroyed, which is upon the face of the ground, both man and cattle and creeping things, fowl of the heaven, and they were destroyed from the earth. And Noah only remained alive, and they that were with him in the ark. And the waters prevailed upon the earth 150 days. A lot of specifics here. And God remembered Noah and every living thing, and all the cattle that was with him in the ark. And God made a wind to pass over the earth, and the waters assuaged. What does that mean? Abated. And the fountains also of the deep and the windows of heaven were stopped, and the rain from heaven was restrained. And the waters returned from off the earth continually. After the end of the 150 days, the waters were abated, and the ark rested the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, upon the mountains of Ararat. Now, this specific information tells us about their calendar. There was a 150-day span from the 17th day of the 2nd month till the 17th day of the 7th month. 150 days, 5 months. That makes 30-day months. Wait a minute. I thought months were 29 and a half days. Now, could the ancient people really have been that dumb? I don't think so. Stonehenge proves otherwise. The pyramids prove otherwise. They knew their astronomy because the stars were their calendar. So what could change the length of a lunar month. We know they had 12 months, so 12 times 30 is 360, a 360-day year. Well, is that a year? Our years are 365 and a quarter. What happened? Genesis 8:5. And the waters decreased continually till the 10th month. And in the 10th month, on the first day of the month, were the tops of the mountains seen. And it came to pass at the end of 40 days that Noah opened the window of the ark which he'd made. He sent forth a raven, which went to and fro till the waters were dried up from off the earth. And he sent forth a dove from him to see if the waters were abated from off the face of the ground. But the dove found no rest for the sole of her foot. So she returned unto him into the ark, for the waters were upon the face of the whole earth. Then he put forth his hand and took her, and pulled her in unto him into the ark. And he stayed yet another 7 days, and again he sent forth the dove out of the ark. And the dove came in to him in the evening, and lo, in her mouth was an olive leaf, plucked off. So Noah knew that the waters were abated from off the earth. And he stayed yet another 7 days, sent forth the dove, and the dove didn't come back to him anymore. It came to pass in the 601st year, in the first month, the first day of the month, the waters were dried up from off the earth, and Noah removed the covering of the ark and looked, and behold, the face of the ground was dry. And in the second month, on the 7th and 20th day of the month, the earth was dried. And God spake unto Noah, saying, Go forth out of the ark, thou and thy wife and thy sons wives with thee. Bring forth with thee every living thing that is with thee, and of all flesh, both fowl and of cattle, and of every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth, that they may breed abundantly in the earth, and be fruitful, and multiply upon the earth. And Noah went forth, and his wife, and his sons' wives with him, every beast, every creeping thing, every fowl, and whatsoever creepeth upon the earth, after their kinds, went forth out of the ark. And Noah built an altar unto the Lord, and took of every clean beast, and every clean fowl, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And the Lord smelled a sweet savor, and the Lord said in his heart, I will not again curse the ground any more for man's sake. For the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I again smite any more everything living as I have done. While the earth remaineth, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, and summer and winter, and day and night shall not cease. Wow. Genesis 9. And God blessed Noah and his sons, and said to them, Be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth. The fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth now, and upon every fowl of the air, and upon all that moves upon the earth, and upon all fish of the sea. Into your hand they are delivered. Every moving thing that liveth shall be meat for you. Even as the green herb have I given you all things. But flesh with the life thereof, which is the blood thereof, shall ye not eat. And surely your blood of your lives will I require. At the hand of every beast will I require it. And at the hand of every man, at the hand of every man's brother, will I require the life of man. Whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed. For in the image of God made he man. And you, be fruitful and multiply, bring forth abundantly in the earth, and multiply therein. And God spake to Noah and to his sons to him, saying, Behold, I establish my covenant with you, and with your seed after you, and with every living thing that is with you, of the fowl, of the cattle, of every beast of the earth with you, from all that go out of the ark to every beast of the earth, and I will establish my covenant with you. Neither shall all flesh be cut off any more by the waters of a flood. Neither shall there be any more of a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, This is the token of the covenant which I make between me and you, and every living creature that's with you, perpetual generations. I do set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be for a token of a covenant between me and the earth. And it shall come to pass, when I bring a cloud over the earth, that the bow shall be seen in the cloud, and I will remember my covenant, which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. And the waters shall no more become a flood to destroy all flesh. And the bow shall be in the cloud, and I will look upon it, that I may remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is upon the earth. And God said to Noah, This is the token of the covenant which I have established between me and all flesh that is upon the earth. So that's the flood. So now, here is the million-dollar question. How does this Genesis account fit with science? Well, let me rephrase that question. How does the Genesis account fit with genuine science? I rephrased it that way because science, like archaeology and many other disciplines, seems lately to be more and more antagonistic to God in the Bible. Yet we know that there is a God who wrote the future across the sky and told the Jews to observe quarantines when people were sick and to wash their hands when they touched the sick or anything that had died, to sterilize things with fire and washing, and to go to the bathroom outside the city and not in the street. All these things almost 3,500 years before we humans even knew there were germs, etc. So how's this all fit? Well, I've been thinking about that for many years. So the Genesis account contains details that describe the effects of something cataclysmic that happened to Earth. So, here is how I formed my theory. And honestly, it is a theory. I'm part scientist. I have a broad education at the college level in chemistry, physics, and geology, plus my lifetime experience with my father in zoology. So, here are some observations taken from facts stated in the Bible. All right? The most obvious question is, where did the water come from? Space. Before the flood, it says there was no rain. The earth was watered by a mist, but then it rained. That seems to indicate a climate change. In addition, afterward, rainbows occurred, apparently for the first time. Another marked change was seen in lifespans. Before the flood, men lived hundreds of years. Afterward, lifespans abruptly diminished. Also before the flood, they measured time with 30-day months, which implied a 360-day year. After the flood, our years are 365 and a quarter. In fact, there's lots of archaeological evidence that ancient societies all around the world observed 360-day years and later had to switch to different calendars, either a lunar calendar with alternating 29 and 30-day months to match the moon, or a solar calendar of 365 days. And so with the lunar calendar, every 19 years, they threw in 7 extra intercalary months, like leap years, but they were leap months. And so every 19 years, the lunar calendar and the solar calendar would match exactly. So that was all worked out by these ignorant people. No, they were pretty smart because they figured that out. So what could cause all those diverse changes? Well, I've been thinking about that ever since I started teaching Old Testament history. And I started as an assistant for John Schoenheit in 1977. So, here we go. Let me start with the rainbows. All right? Now, if rainbows did not start until after the flood, did that mean the properties of light changed? No, not likely. It meant there was no direct sunlight upon the earth. And the milder climate with mist and no rain also supports that the energy reaching the earth was more diffuse. Well, what could cause that? So I began considering if, maybe, the earth had rings like Saturn before the flood. Now, that is not as strange as it seems, because half the planets in our solar system right now have rings. Saturn's rings are most pronounced. They're made of ice. Whoa, maybe that's where some of the water came from. We now know from satellite flybys that Jupiter, Neptune, and Uranus also have rings. We recently had two things happen in our solar system that told us more about rings. First of all, the Cassini space probe, which went to Saturn and looked much closer at the rings, it actually flew between the innermost ring and the planet Saturn and discovered that the innermost ring was falling into the planet. That is where the rings that had been around the other three planets went. They fell into their planet. How can I say that? Because of a second event, which was the Shoemaker-Levy comet, which crashed into Jupiter. And that showed us a remarkable thing. It had been captured by Jupiter's gravity and ultimately was drawn into the planet. But as it got closer and closer, it broke up into several parts which orbited Jupiter separately and then crashed into the planet. That showed us how rings form. They were from comets, which were captured by the planet's gravity, which became, because of their trajectories were just right, they broke up and formed rings. If their trajectory wasn't right, then they'd break up and crash into the planet. They formed rings instead of falling into the planet. So, what if Earth once had rings of water around it? Well, it's not far-fetched, because I said half the planets that we can see have them. They would be between Earth and the moon, just like with Saturn. Most of its moons are outside the rings. And the innermost ring would be falling into the Earth. Well, now, if that was so, that innermost ring depletion would be feeding an additional layer of our atmosphere, like the ozone layer, and all that extra water vapor would be a shield around the Earth. So there would be no direct sunlight. Was that a haze? Or were the clouds transparent? Well, we are all inside the cosmic ice line. It's a spherical zone around the sun where everything inside it gets enough heat from the sun to melt. Now, space is very cold, so any water out there you would think would be ice. But if it's inside the ice line, it would melt from the radiation of the sun and be water vapor. Now, that normally would be swept along with the solar wind, except if it were in a gravity well of a planet. That would be why there were no rainbows before, because there was no direct sunlight. Could that be what the Bible says are the waters that were separated from the waters when God repaired the earth in Genesis 1 and made it to be inhabited like Isaiah 45 declares? Well, I haven't taken off my thinking cap yet. That layer of our atmosphere constantly being replenished by that ring system would also block ultraviolet light reaching the earth, and the consequence of that would be longer lifespans. Even today, the longest living animals live underground or under the sea, and the longest living animal above the ground is a turtle, because it has a shell to protect it from ultraviolet light. Something cataclysmic had to have happened, which caused the ring system to collapse into the earth. Well, what could do that? A large enough planetary body. Wow. Now, believe it or not, that all was a theory that I developed, not knowing what others had arrived at similar conclusions, because we didn't have an internet for many years. But let me tell you how I was thinking, because I told you there probably was a difference in the length of the year. I think God originally made things perfect. 360-day year with 12 30-day months. That obvious perfection goes along with him riding redemption across the sky, making the stars and planets for signs, for seasons, for days, and for years. But what would cause the year to lengthen 5 1/4 days and the moon's orbit to shrink 1/2 day from 30 days to 29 1/2? Well, interestingly, the percentage of change for both those things is almost exactly the same. Oh, wow. At first, I thought that it was due to the water weight being added to the earth. Because if you were swinging a rock on a rubber band and you put a bunch of metal washers on that rubber band and you held them next to your hand, and then let's say you start swinging the rock around at a steady pace, well, what will happen? That rubber band will stretch out to a certain point where the centrifugal and the centripetal forces are equal, and the orbit around one orbit would be constant speed. So then, what would happen if you let a few of those washers that were on the rubber band slip down from your hand as you're swinging it, and they would work their way out to the rock and add more mass to the rock? What would happen? The added weight would cause the rubber band to stretch more, and so the orbital time would increase, right? So then I thought, what would that added mass on the Earth from the water do to the moon? Well, it would cause it to be attracted with more force and bring it closer, decreasing its orbital time. Then I thought, what if the flood caused that? So, if the amount of added mass to make a year longer by 5 1/4 days was the same amount of mass that caused the moon's orbit to decrease by 1/2 a day, that would be the Holy Grail. But when one takes into account the weight of the rings, that simply would be added to the weight of the Earth relative to the sun, plus the moon's weight, when you figure out what's swinging on that rubber band thing, because they would act as one gravitational unit relative to the sun. So the added weight would have had to come from out in space and not the rings to make it extend, have a more of a longer year. So I tried plugging in all those formulas, because we know about the mass of the Earth, we know what the mass of the moon is, we know what the gravitational constant is, and the physics formulas for planetary motion. It wasn't too much of a difficult algebra problem, but it did not work out, because the amount of water to make enough of an increase in mass to do that would be much too much water. The density of water is much less than the density of rock, lava, and molten iron that's in the Earth. So I had to scrap that idea. But what else can affect the motion of a planetary body? Another planetary body. So, what if another planetary body passed through our solar system? Astronomers say there are rogue planets in the universe, which are not orbiting stars, but flung free and hurtle through the galaxy. Well, what if one of them grazed the Earth? What would happen to the water already on the Earth? Tsunamis. We recently witnessed an asteroid which movement showed that it was not from our solar system, but came through it from outside of it. They called that Oumuamua. There were theories of a body called Nemesis, the planet Nemesis or star Nemesis. And right now there are folks looking for a ninth planet. So it's possible our own moon was caused by a collision between a primordial Earth and another smaller planet. So, I don't think the world was created in 7 days. The 7 days are what God did to repair it. Because what about the time gap between Genesis 1:1 and 1:2? The earth became without form and void. So you can have all the time you want, even 13 billion years if you want, between the Big Bang and now. So, I'm sorry, but are your minds spinning? So this is the scenario that fits all the criteria. A planetary body grazed the Earth, caused the ring system to collapse, and then all those protections for the ultraviolet light were gone, and the lifespans decreased. Water came to the Earth from space, probably with that planetary body, or a large comet, or something like that. We don't know. But this scenario fits all the criteria. But there's more. Because all the scientists, when I run this by them, they say, yes, but. Well, here's my answer. If this scenario is true, then all the scientists' dates based on carbon dating are not correct. Why? Because carbon dating is based upon the assumption that the radiation from the sun reaching the Earth has been constant to irradiate the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere to produce the carbon-14 isotope at a constant rate. So the energy from the sun in the upper atmosphere irradiates the carbon dioxide that's there. Carbon atoms normally have 12 protons and neutrons, and carbon-14 gets extra neutrons in it, so it has 14 instead of 12. And then what happens to any radioactive element is that they decay, because it's not natural for them to have the extra stuff. And we know the rate at which that happens for each element, and that rate is called its half-life. So after a certain amount of time, half of it has degraded back to the next level. All right, basically that's speaking. So carbon-14, we know what the half life is. So the theory is that the irradiation from the sun reaching the carbon dioxide in the upper atmosphere, they assume, has been constant. And so then they measure the amount of carbon-14 that is in their sample. And they say that their sample, whatever was living being or a plant, piece of wood, that plant was alive, and while it was alive, it was transpiring the carbon dioxide at its rate, and the carbon dioxide had that percentage of carbon-14 in it, and it maintained equilibrium while that thing was alive. And then they say that when it died, it stopped transpiring, and the amount of carbon that was in that thing didn't change after that period. And so then the carbon in it was degrading from carbon-14 at the rate that they know. So they measured the amount of carbon-14 in the sample, and then they say they know how old it is. But that's assuming that the percentage of carbon-14 in the atmosphere has all been the same. Well, what if it wasn't? Carbon-14 is only effective up to 70,000 years, because after that, the amount of carbon-14 is too small to measure. Well, if there were rings around the Earth, replenishing an extra layer of water sphere around the world, then the amount of sunlight irradiating the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere would be less, which would make all their dates before the flood appear to be much older than they really are. Do you know what that would do? It would make the flood of Noah into a flood that all the scientists agree did occur. That flood occurred when the glaciers melted. It's been dated by carbon-14 dating to 10,000 BC. But if those are carbon dates and the Earth had rings and now doesn't, all those dates are too old. That's when there was a land bridge between Asia and Alaska, and people came across and populated North and South America. That's when the North Sea was a plain full of mammoths whose tusks are now being found under the North Sea. So, okay, this all seems to fit, but it's a theory. It's just a theory. It's just my theory cooked up in my head. I hope I got some revelation, but I don't know. But there's a lot of other scholars and researchers who have done the same thing over the centuries. And they've come up with other scenarios based upon the best knowledge they had available to them in their time. I was fascinated by a work by Donald Patton named The Biblical Flood and the Ice Epoch. That's available to you from creationism.org. And so I'm going to publish in my notes on Way Beyond the URL for this. Another good source, The Global Flood by John D. Morris, the Institute for Creation Research, which is www.icr.org. Ren sent me a paper titled Noah and the Deluge, a chronological, historical, and archaeological evidence. And that also shows how unreliable carbon-14 is. We can make that available to you. So throughout the centuries, there have been quite a few. Like, for example, Isaac Newton thought a comet caused the flood. Isaac Vail in 1874 had what he called the Canopy Theory, that there was a water sphere, okay, so to speak. There are other people who have thought there were rings on the earth. So there's a ton of stuff out there. And a lot of these people poke a lot of holes in the conventional theory of the age of man and all this stuff that is a conventional geology and all that. Well, I bet that one day we'll be able to cherry pick the best from all of these and present a convincing account of what happened. Because now there always will be naysayers. But as I have said repeatedly, we already know there's a God in the spiritual realm because we see it every day. But I trust that what I have presented tonight will expand our understanding and our trust in our Creator. Bless you. There you go.